Today we discuss Qadira, and to begin to understand the nuanced character of Qadira, one must first recognize its dual identity. Positioned as a nation of the Inner Sea, Qadira actively participates in the intricate web of regional politics in and around the Inner Sea, its evolution shaped by a complex interplay of local relationships. Concurrently, it is not a nation at all, but rather the western satrapy of the extensive Padishah Empire of Kelesh, an ancient and influential dominion characterized by opulence far surpassing the collective imagination of Inner Sea nations, guided by principles and values strikingly unfamiliar to the average denizen of the region. Situated at the western extremity of that empire, Qadira assumes a pivotal position in the primary Keleshite trade route spanning the colossal expanse of Qasmaran. Its significance to Kelesh is underscored by the immense wealth traversing its borders weekly, a monetary influx that greatly surpasses the accumulated riches of most Avestani nations. However, despite the apparent affluence exhibited in Qadiran cities like Katheer, the majority of this prosperity does not find a lasting residence within Qadira. A prevailing sentiment among disgruntled Qadirans articulates a stark contrast, asserting that Qadira subsists on glass while the rest of Kelesh revels in diamonds. Meanwhile, in the eyes of the Padishah Empire, Qadira endures as a frontier region, a designation sustained even after millennia of existence. The Keleshites view Avestani and Garundi cultures through a lens of condescension, perceiving them as primitive and barbaric. Yet no satrapy within the empire is more attuned to these cultures than Qadira. Positioned on the empire's periphery, sharing borders with the often adversarial nation of Taldor, and separated from its nearest imperial counterparts by an inhospitable desert which requires some concerted effort to cross, Qadirans harbor a prevailing belief in the precariousness of their existence, feeling at times connected to the greater Padishah Empire as if only by the thinnest of threads. The history of Qadira. Qadira's extreme climates kept its population low during much of its pre-Earthfall history. Scattered farming communities dotted the coasts, nomadic tribes roamed the deserts and plains, and a few major towns rose and fell. Little evidence remains of these settlements, other than the ruins outside Katheer that Keleshite archaeologists have asserted existed even before Earthfall. It is claimed by these historians that in this pre-Earthfall period many subsequent cultures built over this original site, each rising from the ruins of the last, though the identities of these early occupants of Qadira's great rivers remains lost to history. With few natural resources and a hard environment even before the Earthfall cataclysm, Earthfall in Qadira likely wiped out any indigenous culture altogether. Through the ages of darkness and anguish, the deserts of Qadira were particularly quiet. Things were less quiet further east, however. So let's take a quick look at the history of the Empire of Kelesh as well. At this point, it becomes incumbent on us to dispel some common Avestinian misconceptions about the Keleshite people. Most Avestani consider Keleshite to be a single ethnicity, but to the people of Qasmaran it is a constructed identity designed to bring unity to the myriad cultures of the Padishah Empire. Most of the contemporary Keleshite nobility is of mixed Althameri and Ashmayar descent, and it was this second group that first settled in and around Katheer and started to build relations with the Parahin dwarves through the early years of the Age of Destiny. Meanwhile, in the heart of their empire, after conquering the empires of Katib and Media, the nascent empire of Kelesh, and thus now comprising four major ethnicities, began referring to its people as Keleshites and focusing on establishing a unified Keleshite culture. Today, more have been brought into the fold, and 6 major ethnicities are considered to comprise the Keleshite culture. These are as follows. Ashmayars. Thought to have been the first tribe to settle and start building the great Qadiran city of Katheer, based on most available archaeological evidence, the majority of this tribe in the heartland of the Keleshite Empire was subdued by the Althameri people as part of their first great conquest. However, a variant of this tale exists, one where the Ashmayars, renowned for their beauty, gentleness, and refinement, peacefully integrated into the empire after helping the Althameri find peace in themselves. Today, only a handful of noble families can substantiate a predominantly Ashmayar lineage. Claims to Ashmayar ancestry abound among artists, socialites, and the like. Ashmayars typically possess warm olive-toned skin, delicate frames, and dark hair that shimmers with metallic hues of copper and gold when touched by sunlight. The Keleshites associate the virtue of grace with the Ashmayar people. Althameri. Considered to be the first progenitors of what is now termed the Keleshite people, the Althameri tribes hold a revered status in official narratives, credited with propelling the empire's rise through their unparalleled military competence. The imperial family and much of Keleshite nobility proudly trace their lineage to the Althameri. Many customs and attire associated with the broader nation of Keleshite actually originate from the Althameri traditions. Althameri individuals typically boast tall statures, bronze-toned skin, dark locks, and distinctive strong facial features. The Keleshites associate the virtue of zeal with the Althameri people. Katibi. Once rulers of a pre-Earthfall empire spanning the lush jungles and fertile farmlands along Kazmarin's southern coastline, the Katibi people are celebrated for their intellectual prowess, evidenced through their grand libraries and other remarkable engineering feats. They were the ones that first established the foundational trading routes now known as the Golden Road, facilitating connections with distant lands such as Tianxia, Vudra, and Garand. Often of diminutive stature, Katibis possess deeply pigmented skin, sleek black hair, often adorned with vibrant patterns, although hues of amber, grey, and green are not uncommon. The Keleshites associate the virtue of inventiveness with the Katibi people. Medians. The other southern people of the Keleshite Empire, the Medians once wielded imperial power of their own, engaging in prolonged conflicts with the Katibi and claiming dominion over many port cities along Kardaji Bay. Their penchant for efficiency birthed a pioneering financial system, housing the oldest operational banks on Galarian. Short in stature with ruddy complexions, Medians hold a distinct appreciation for art and aesthetics, favoring seafood over red meat and poultry. Those who identify as Medians often gravitate towards occupations in finance or public service. The Keleshites associate the virtue of elegance with the Median people. Susianams. Renowned as the peoples of the tides, the Susianams embarked on a nomadic existence across Kazmarin following an ancient catastrophe that obliterated their ancestral cities. Some remnants of their unique traditions endure within Kelesh, notably among the clergy devoted to their moon god, who don veils of white and bear silver tattoos. These Nightseers possess a remarkable affinity for water, essential for navigating desert terrain, though prolonged separation from the ocean proves detrimental to their health. Accompanied by protectors bearing intricate gold tattoos known as day guards, these clergy offer invaluable guidance in arid landscapes. The Keleshites associate the virtue of adaptability with the Susianam people. Zurehi. Sharing ancestral ties with the Althameri people, the Zurehi maintain a preference for life amidst the steppes and grasslands of Kazmarin, primarily engaging in herding and agriculture. Distinguished by their elaborately woven attire, tightly curled hair, and hooded eyes, the Zurehi remain conspicuous in urban settings, which they tend to eschew except for necessary trade engagements. The Keleshites associate the virtue of honor with the Zurehi people. Let's focus a little on the history of these tribes. The Althameri tribe, who can be seen as the progenitor people of the now great empire, came to settle in the deserts of modern-day Ayarad in -4583. According to the oral stories of the earliest ancestors of the Althameri tribespeople, they fled the grass sea of Kazmarin, from where they had originated, to escape retribution for a now long-forgotten transgression against their kinsfolk there. The Althameri general Bithra al-Hizbat conquered the last of the Ashmayar cities in Ayarad, and therefore set the foundations for the formation of the Padishah Empire. According to archaeological records found around Katheer around this time, Ashmayar exiles from Ayarad traveled westwards towards Qadira. They eventually re-established Katheer over the ruins of the pre-Earthfall cultures that once held that land. At some point not long after this, the Parahin dwarves came to Qadira, as the dwarves came elsewhere over Galarian, though they reached the surface later than other dwarf cultures, and they came in fewer numbers. They also integrated more quickly with local humans and transitioned swiftly to surface life. And like other Ergaxen, or surface dwarves scattered throughout Galarian, they did not remain in the mountains where they had first originated. For this reason, it's not even clear today from which mountains the originally deep-dwelling dwarves came from, but in all likelihood it was either the Zho Mountains that separate northern and southern Qadira, or the southern range of the White Mountains that separates northern Qadira from the windswept wastes. Perhaps the latter is more likely, since the most prevalent Parahin communities can be found from the Pashman River's source in the southern range to the capital of Katheer. The harsh, dry climate required adjustment to, and so the dwarves made fast friends with the Ashmayar humans, which had already come to the region by the Age of Anguish. This would have started to occur by -3500, just towards the end of that age, but before the founding of Osirian. In minus 3470, as discussed in various other videos about Eastern Garand, the Empire of Assyrian was founded and ushered in what historians commonly call the Age of Destiny. This is the period following the Age of Anguish that is characterized by humanity's return to prominence in Galarian. In minus 1281, not too far north of Katheer, the nation of Taldor was founded by descendants of Aslant, who intermarried with local human tribes. By the time of the founding of Taldor, the Padishah Empire was only concentrated in the eastern reaches of Ayarad, at quite some distance from Taldor. Although Katheer did exist at the time, it was an independent city-state. Qadira had no national identity, and the majority of the Qadiran territory as it exists today was only a collection of small settlements along the rivers and waterways and a variety of nomadic tribes that would traverse the deserts. The conflict with Taldor was still many years away. Meanwhile, in central Kazmaran, just north of Ayarad and along the south banks of the Castervan Sea, another powerful Kazman polity, the nation of Ninshabur, was growing in power and influence. It is likely that the power of Ninshabur would have challenged the hegemony of the Padishah Empire of Kelesh were it not for the catastrophic events of minus 632. From a terrible pit leading deep into the Darklands, a horrible spawn of Rovagug, a titanic behemoth known as the Tarask, destroyed Ninshabur in its entirety. The beast rampaged across Kazmaran, crossed through the lands of modern-day Qadira, and entered into Assyrian over the Strait of Maharev. As we know from my Central Mwangi Expanse video, the Tarask ultimately crossed into the Mwangi Expanse over the Koran Pass and destroyed several of the Shori Empire's flying cities, thus beginning the downfall of that civilization. Back in Ayarad, the Padishah Empire continued to expand. By minus 500, the empire conquered the territories formerly controlled by the tribes of Ketib and Media, and they set their sights westwards, at the Hakaman and Meraz Deserts, particularly at the lands controlled by the nomadic Susianam people, and the southern windswept wastes, largely controlled by the Zarehi people. By minus 150 or so, the Padishah Empire controlled all the lands from Ayarad to the southern range. Meanwhile, in the north, Taldor continued to expand its reach in Avestan, so Padishah Empire Adalan IV began to set his sight on the important coastal region south of the Pashman River as a means of maintaining imperial control of the Golden Road geographic region. In minus 78, Keleshites first invaded Qadira, initially, according to official reports, without the emperor's direct orders to do so. However, Padishah Empire Adalan IV soon approved the territorial acquisition afterward and fortified it against reclamation by Avestani powers. Interestingly, given the sparseness of the native population, most of the battles the imperial forces fought were with Taldan allies of independent Katheer, not with the region's residents. This initial contact marked the first of many conflicts between Taldor and Kelesh to come. After its victory, the Keleshites moved quickly to prepare the colony for full incorporation as a satrapy, and engineers, governors, clerics, and architects followed in the army's wake. The empire, now experienced at assimilating foreign populations, took care to fund local industries, offer communities the same services given to Keleshite settlements, and promote local leaders into its administration. It largely succeeded in portraying itself as a benefactor interested in preserving the autonomy of the existing communities, as long as they paid their taxes, and protecting them from the Taldans, who, the imperial emissaries explained, would exploit and impoverish the local Qadirans. By minus 43, the Empire of Kelesh officially welcomed Qadira as the empire's newest satrapy, installing the first satrap, Kerush, and setting formal borders. The Keleshite administration rapidly expanded southwards. Though Keleshite traders had been visiting Garan for centuries prior to claiming Qadira as a satrapy, their new control over the region allowed the construction of several port cities to make trade between the continents safer and easier. For the first 1500 years of Qadira's existence, skirmishes with its enemies in Taldor were a daily reality of life. Qadiran satraps focused on increasing the size of their forces, building the largest divisions of the Satrapian Guard in Kelesh. Qadira's desire to prove itself as a significant military power reached its height in the second millennium AR, when conflicts with Taldor intensified until open war seemed inevitable. At the time, satrap Zerbistes I negotiated with Empress Karela III to make his position a hereditary one, and to assume complete control over Qadira's internal affairs. The Empress believed that Taldor's economic policies were unsustainable and ruinous, and that its armies were overextended. Confident that Taldor would inevitably collapse in on itself, and that its vestiges would voluntarily submit to Keleshite stewardship, she had no interest in the expense or bloodshed of an unnecessary war. In early 1532, she eventually agreed to Zerbisti's requests, but demanded he turn management of Qadira's foreign affairs over to an imperial vizier. Despite the presence of the imperial vizier in the satrap's court, since that time Qadira has possessed this dual identity. Largely managed as an independent nation, the satrapy of Qadira sets its own laws and manages its own affairs, but an imperial vizier ensures it acts in accordance with the Padishah Empire's foreign policies. It's a delicate tightrope, and one that it continues to walk to this day. Later that year, Satrap Zerbistes, in collaboration with the imperial vizier, finally signed a peace treaty with Taldor. This begins a period of unprecedented peace with its northern neighbor, in which relatively few conflicts broke out between Qadira and Taldor. Not content with only the small victory of successfully brokering peace with Taldor, Zerbistes sought to prove the worth of the independent satrapy to the greater empire by expanding the Keleshite influence westwards. When Keleshite agents had first reached Osirian, they had found an ancient land ruled by a powerful dynasty, although the land's ruling pharaohs had fallen to corruption and complacency. Zerbistes saw a great opportunity to expand Qadira's influence here. He deployed agents of the Padishah Empire who worked covertly in Osirian to inspire slave revolts and further destabilize the already compromised government. This revolution allowed Qadiran forces to seize control of the Garundi nation, securing the Osirian territories by the end of 1532. Not long after this, prompted by collisions with the local Osiriani faiths, the radical and unusually aggressive cult of the Dawnflower first rose to prominence in 2217, as described in both my Osirian and Katapesh deep dive videos. The cult of the Dawnflower's influence spread, not just among the newly conquered territories, but also back to Qadira and the Keleshite heartlands of Ayarad. In fact, by 2920, the ruling satrap of Qadira, Geber II, had converted to the cult of the Dawnflower. Later that year, when a devastating quake killed tens of thousands of Qadirans, satrap Geber II declared this to be proof of Taldan allegiance to the evil god Rovagug. In truth, many Taldan cities were just as badly affected by the devastating earthquake as Qadira had been. Regardless, Geber II formally requested permission to go to war with Taldor, but the Empress Alashat VII refused. Despite her refusal, numerous border conflicts broke out, interrupting almost 400 years of peace with their northern rival. To curtail the worst instincts of the new satrap, the Empress began exerting more political and economic influence over the willful state. After the imperial throne took a more direct hand in managing Qadira and compelled the satrapy to focus on its role as a trade center, prosperity began to enrich many of the Qadiran families that played nice with the imperial factions. Some Qadiran emigrant families chose to join the ruling classes of the independent and growing city-state of Absalom at the heart of the Inner Sea. Even amid this economic boom, however, some settlements did not thrive. For example, the city of al-Bashir mysteriously fell into ruin, pirates conquered the resort city of Sedek, and the Taldans reclaimed territory along Qadira's northern border. By 2953, as described in my Osirian video, the cult of the Dawnflower also drove the Osirian Keleshites to overthrow the locally appointed Osirian satrap and replace him with a Keleshite noble, independent of Qadira and the greater empire. Thereafter, Osirian became once again a separate polity from the rest of the empire. In 4067, the succession to the imperial throne turned bloody, and many of the extended imperial family members living in Katheer returned to Kelesh to support their chosen candidates or put themselves forward as potential successors. The struggle only intensified over the next decade. The imperial vizier soon followed the returning Keleshites, and without a direct representative of the imperial throne present, satrap Geber III invaded Taldor in 4079 with an army of more than 40,000 members of the Satrapian Guard, and detachments of the imperial forces who were receiving conflicting orders from the capital. Already overextended in its efforts to maintain its western holdings, Taldor struggled to hold off the invasion. As they pushed the Taldan coffers to the point of breaking, in 4081 Taldor's westernmost province of Cheliax declared itself independent, taking with it the majority of the empire. Taldor had effectively collapsed. Despite its greatly reduced might, Taldor put up an admirable defense against its now far wealthier southern rival. It would be another 500 years before Taldor and Qadira achieved peace again, and the conflict would increase both Qadira's confidence as a military power and its conviction that Taldor must fall for Qadira to become a safe and stable nation. The satraps have since continued to focus on increasing the size of the Satrapian Guard. Today, Qadira enjoys wealth nearly unrivaled in the Inner Sea region, and it maintains one of the largest militaries on Avestan. Though the nations of Taldor and Qadira signed a peace treaty in 4603, border skirmishes between the two longtime rivals remain frequent, and both sides secretly prepare for the seemingly inevitable war to come again. It is also finally beginning to solve its diplomatic relations with Osirian, who overthrew their Keleshite sultans in 4609. Also, quite recently, in 4692, Emperor Kelesh XXII of the great Padishah Empire took a Qadira noble as a consort. She bore him a son named Prince Yaril the following year, whom Emperor Kelesh has chosen as his heir. These events have empowered the Qadiran faction in the imperial court. As of publication of this video, the current game year is 4724, so Qadiran Prince Yaril is now a grown man, 31 years of age, and ready to take over the position of emperor from the aging Kelesh. What it will mean to have a Qadiran on the throne of the Padishah Empire itself, only time will tell. The government of Qadira. Qadira's relationship with its parent empire has been fraught with tension since its inception. Empress Azarmi VI first dubbed the satrapy our angry daughter in 1429, and while it is considered an indelicate epithet, it has remained in quiet use ever since. In Kazmarin, the heartland of the Empire of Kelesh, the unusual continuity of the imperial family have caused Kelesh's rulers to think in terms of centuries, gradual shifts in climate and population, and in the inevitable march of progress. Kelesh's rulers believe that all of Galarian will someday pay them fealty voluntarily, but they feel no need to rush the process. Qadiran citizens, on the other hand, have always believed that they exist under constant threat of annihilation at the hands of Taldan warmongers. The nation perceives its problems as immediate and pressing, rather than as conflicts that can be handled over the span of multiple generations. Qadira's residents long for the empire to comprehend the threat that hangs over them even now. The history of Qadira's relationship with Kelesh has been defined by these incompatible modes of thinking. To Kelesh, Qadira is impatient, belligerent, and blinded by a foolish romantic attachment to a mythologized warrior past that is impractical, not to mention unenlightened, as a philosophy of governance. To Qadira, Kelesh sits complacently amid its wealth and safety, ignorant of Avestani or Garundi bloodthirst, and unprepared to deal with those savages should these nations decide to invade again. Through the millennia, a pattern has emerged. Qadira satraps take advantage of distractions in central Kelesh to build up the Satrapian Guard and begin military campaigns, and Kelesh cleans up the inevitable aftermath, decreases financial support to force the satrapy to reduce its military, and increases the authority of the imperial vizier. Upon the ascension of a new satrap, Kelesh eases its hold, and the cycle begins anew. In terms of how this complicated interlay of relationships works, the governance of Qadira and how they map to government figures and their positions follow here, in rough order of importance. The imperial throne. First and foremost, all of the satrapies of Kelesh answer absolutely to the imperial throne, and Qadira is no exception. The ultimate authority is the emperor or empress of Kelesh. As the twilight years of Kelesh XXII's life draw to a close, the coming succession is pushing Keleshite society into a frenzy of gossip and intrigue. Prince Yaril is expected to succeed him, but he possesses the hot nature and belligerence of his Qadiran blood. The aging emperor has indicated that if the current heir, Yaril, does not change his dissolute ways, he will disown him, rendering him ineligible to take the throne. The satrap. The unmarried Zerbistes II is a brooding man who wishes to prove himself to his emperor through a military conquest of Taldor. His cousins Faraz and Melchior angle to replace him, and the unrest around the Qadiran succession mirrors that which surrounds the imperial throne. Another important figure in court, though not possessing a formal seat, is the emperor's niece Layla, who has been supported by Zerbistes II in his palace in Katheer for some time now. The imperial vizier. Vizier Hebizid Vraj maintains magical contact with the imperial court and attempts to sway the satrap towards peace. He sponsors numerous expeditions to explore ruins in the Ketz and Meraz deserts with the hopes of redirecting Qadiran violence towards ancient horrors rather than bordering nations. The Cheyennes. The Cheyennes are members of the extended imperial family, whose title is often erroneously translated in Taldan as prince or princess. The Cheyennes number in the thousands and represent the upper strata of Qadiran society. They are the most sought-after patrons in all of Qadira. Qadiran patronage centers on the relationship between a patron, who wields the influence, and a client who provides a service, but ultimately who hopes to advance their social standing from their association with a patron. The Amers. Because Keleshite descent is matrilineal, only the children of a female member of the imperial family are Cheyennes. However, it's not uncommon for emperors to have additional consorts. Children of emperors who are not members of the imperial family are each known by the title Amer, and they exert their own influence in Keleshite politics. The noble families. Only nobles may own land in Kelesh. Adult nobles belong to a council that vote on issues relevant to the satrapy, and they often pressure the satrap to comply with their decisions. The nobles wield significant power, and even the emperor must step carefully when the noble families unite on an issue. The Hatharat. Kelesh's intelligence agency and diplomatic corps, this well-coordinated organization is responsible for the Keleshite Empire's affairs abroad, and it is particularly active in border satrapies like Qadira. The Hatharat report up to the imperial throne, and while they recognize the authority of the imperial vizier, they are not required necessarily to comply with directives from the satrap, something which creates some friction on occasion. The Peerless. Of similar authority to the Hatharat, but more aligned with Qadira, are the Peerless. This is a collection of the most successful citizens of Qadira, especially adventurers, explorers, military heroes, and scholars, and they form a kind of council of advisors for the satrap. As a group comprised largely of ex-adventurers, they took a hard stance against Qadira's previous legislation that had legalized slavery, and have allied with the Firebrand's faction to bring about change in their own country. Ascension to one of the Peerless is one of the greatest honors a Qadiran adventurer can achieve. The Civil Servants. Any empire as large as Kelesh requires considerable staff to run, and civil service is an old and honored tradition for many families in Qadira. Given the inaccessibility of the nobles and satrap to most citizens, having a good relationship with those in the lower echelons of government is often the first step towards getting word to those in higher positions. The highest-ranked civil servants in Qadira, aside from the members of the satrap's court, are representatives of the imperial bank. They are attended at all times by genie bodyguards, and are ostensibly politically neutral, though their words can stop or start a war. The Silent Blades of Katheer. These thieves and assassins are the eyes, ears, and blades of the satrap, when he wishes to act outside the authority of his office or the auspices of the imperial vizier. These loyal servants work for the betterment of Qadira, or so they believe, by slaying those who draw the satrap's ire. The military. The Empire mandates 2 years of military service from all its citizens, though the definition of service can vary quite considerably. There are 2 primary military divisions in Kelesh, the Satrapian Guard and the Imperial Forces. The Satrapian Guard is stationary. It protects each satrapy's borders, aids citizens during disasters, and functions as more of a police force. The Imperial Forces, which are considered more prestigious, protect the capital and outside borders of the Empire. They fight wars, guard embassies in foreign lands, escort dignitaries, and protect the valuable trade routes. In addition to their skilled cavalry and phalanx, one notable feature of the Qadiran military is the presence of the Ashifta. Known in Taldane as a battle witch, an Ashifta drifts like a phantom among the enemy armies, calling down disasters upon their heads and weakening their resolve. Qadiran Ashiftas usually go veiled, and even their cohorts in the imperial forces superstitiously believe that seeing their faces brings misfortune. The merchant houses, possessing almost as much clout as the military, are the great merchant houses of Qadira. Just as is the case in other parts of the Inner Sea, the power of the merchant houses is felt most acutely when they choose to move collectively towards some common goal. The citizenry. Beneath the noble families, the military, and the great merchant houses, the roles of Qadira's citizenry is determined by a whole range of factors, including their family and tribal affiliations, as well as membership in guilds, religious orders, and other organizations. Like many places in the Inner Sea, Qadira has only recently renounced the practice of slavery, and as such there is a significant underclass in Qadira of former slaves that are now technically citizens, but rarely treated as such. Faith in Qadira. Keleshite myths holds that the Althameri tribes who founded Kelesh fled the Grass Sea to the harsh, empty deserts of Ayarad, a land no other people claimed or wanted. Monsters and evil outsiders haunted this desert, and the environment itself allowed them no more than a wandering subsistence existence. For centuries they sacrificed the finest of their meager flocks to placate demon lords and other vicious powers, until a desperate tribal leader challenged the sun itself, asking how it could watch this cruelty and remain unmoved. The goddess Sarenrae responded to their plight, and in the millennia since, the Althameri tribes have remained largely faithful to their covenant with the Dawnflower. High Priestess Samisala in Katheer is the highest representative of the Saronite faith in the region, though Saronite worship is so extensive that multiple sects have emerged, each with slightly varying philosophies, the most infamous of which is the Dawnflower cult, that seeks to spread the faith using the sharp end of the scimitar. Though Sarenrae's worship is most widespread in Qadira, it is a common misconception that it is the region's only faith. The empire comprises many cultures and peoples, and is highly tolerant in matters of religion. In addition to the faiths of Abadar, Calistria, Irori, Nethys, and Shaylin, worshippers of more obscure religions, largely unknown outside of Kelesh, can also be found in Qadira. Atar-Shamayan, the name on the wind, an ancient and mysterious deity said to have gifted horses and prophecy to humankind. Little is known of his nature, but it is said that in his remote temples, if one is quiet enough, one can hear the echoes on the wind of words spoken in both the distant past and future. The Cult of the Hawk, a mysterious organization formed of Qadiran and Osiriani mystics and traders, and possibly dedicated to Horus and other avian members of the Osirianic pantheon, the Cult of the Hawk has managed to take positions of power in many commercial ventures in Absalom. The Dust Speakers. These grey-robed priests wander the streets and seem to trail misfortune in their wakes. They are said to be the clergy of a lost culture's deity who still seethes at his people's fall. Lugali Simaru, the Palm Tree King, a pre-Keleshite deity from Casmaran, is revered in Qadira as the guardian of oases. Travelers leave gifts of small bronze palm leaves set with sapphires at his shrines to invoke his protection. The Lost God of the Night Seers. The Susianam culture has largely assimilated into broader Keleshite culture, but some of its wandering oracles known as Night Seers remain. Night Seers are a curious and mysterious religious group, and they give up a portion of their ability to relate to the material world in order to hear their deity's wisdom more clearly. Oathos. The Everlost is a pre-Keleshite moon god from Casmaran. Worshipped in the ancient empire of Katib, Oathos was the lover of a goddess who grew jealous and poisoned him. In more recent Keleshite mythology, he has now been reimagined as a consort of Sarenrae who suffers from a divine wasting disease. Oathos is a patron to those with chronic illnesses. Kadeshatam. Less a religion than a sort of monastic philosophy, this sect holds that a bond with divine energy can be achieved through physical union. A Kedeshat is a highly trained mystic and healer who focuses on helping people overcome difficulties related to intimacy. Roidira. Little is known about this deity, sometimes called the Dark Sister of Knowledge. Members of her cult claim that deep understanding of truth appears as madness to the less knowledgeable, and that nihilism is the ultimate result of complete understanding. Shahar. The only records of this ancient goddess's existence are nearly illegible inscriptions in deep desert ruins. Taboos and rumors of curses keep most would-be researchers away, though some desert tribes claim that knowledge that bestows terrible powers waits for any who dare the ruins, should they be willing to pay the price. The Temple of Law. While Keleshites are not as obsessively lawful as the Chelish, they understand that knowing the law and its loopholes is essential to doing business. The Temple of Law, which treats the legal profession as a type of priesthood, venerates a trinity of gods that include Abadar, Asmodeus, and Zols. The Usij. Worshippers of the Div Lord Araman, Usij cultists seek to bring down civilization by corrupting resources and whispering poisoned counsel in leaders' ears. The White Feather. The followers of the White Feather preach the rejection of material wealth. The White Feather cult has fallen slightly into disfavor, as after a secret meeting with a group of White Feather adherents, the satrap prohibited them from publicly proselytizing. The followers of the White Feathers persist, though. Some now publicly claim that Qadira's martial ambitions will cause the nation's fall. Yaya, the Cry in the Wastes, hears the prayers of childless families, or those who have borne no daughters to inherit their wealth and carry on their family's business and honor. She is known to grant children to those who petition her, even to those past childbearing age, but her gifts always seem to come at a cost. The Qadiran Gazetteer. Qadira is divided into 9 regions, largely defined by their geographical characteristics, although they also correspond to formal administrative divisions. The 9 regions are as follows: the plains of Paresh, the White Mountains, the Pashman River Valley, the Ketz Desert, the Tapur Forest, the Zho Mountains, the Maharev Jungle, the Alavah Peninsula, and the Meraz Desert. Let's start in the north and move south, covering these territories as we go. The plains of Paresh. These grassy plains are home to semi-nomadic tribes, descended from the peaceful indigenous herding peoples that intermingled with the Keleshite settlers. Most continue to breed bison, cattle, goats, sheep, and other livestock, but some tribes have taken to raiding as well, both north with the Taldans, creating no end of political trouble, but even raiding Qadiran settlements. The most famous city in the plains of Paresh is of course Katheer, the Qadiran capital, which is where we'll start our deeper dive into this region, but the northernmost city of Delena, the gardened oasis city of Alvarish in the interior, and the port cities of the Pashman River Delta, Avilan and Demira, are all sizable cities in their own right. In all of Qadira, the people of the plains of Paresh are the most eager for war with Taldor, perhaps because their region is most often subjected to attacks from their northern rival. Katheer, capital of Qadira. Katheer was already an ancient city when the Keleshites conquered it. It had risen, fallen, been left in ruins, been rebuilt, fallen again, and largely been abandoned when the nomads of the plains of Paresh began to meet among the eerily broken statues and collapsed white stone buildings to trade. The first visit by a Keleshite ruler, Empress Arashat II in 1396, prompted a flurry of construction, as the residents attempted to prove to their far-off potentate that the barbarians of the north had not reduced them to something less than proper citizens of the empire. In time, Katheer expanded to devour most of the ruins of the ancient cities that stood on the site before it, though some outlying areas, known as the Old City, remain untouched. Satrap Meristi III, during a period of tension with the tribes of the plains of Paresh in the late 3100s, ordered the construction of a wall. Not wanting to limit the city's future growth, she ordered the semicircle's center point be constructed 2 miles north of the palace, which was well outside the city limits at that time. Today, Katheer is a distillation of Qadira itself, wealthy, beautiful, proud, harsh, and ever watchful for slights to its honor or threats to its security. Glittering, ornate palaces coexist with the abject poverty of its outlying neighborhoods. Newly constructed buildings, each more luxurious than the last, shoulder their way towards the sky, while their ancient neighbors fall into disrepair. To Avistani eyes, Katheer is a wonderland of wealth and exotic sophistication. By the standards of the Keleshite Empire, however, it is a frontier town, albeit a strategically important one, stranded at the far end of the empire among the primitive and belligerent peoples of Avistan. Important locations in Katheer include the Garden of Gifts. A towering jeweled brass palace, the Garden of Gifts is filled with beautiful young serving men and women, games of chance, high-end shopping, and other delights. Run by genies, the garden also offers visitors the chance to do a favor for a genie in return for a wish. Visitors would take care to bring a lawyer with them to formalize terms, however, as the genies usually get the better end of a deal when negotiating. The Visitors Center, a gold-and-white building in ornate Keleshite style, the Visitors Center should be the first stop in Katheer for those without imperial citizenship. Foreigners who register here receive benefits and protections, while those who neglect to register may quickly find themselves on the wrong side of the law. The Port of Katheer, a long stretch of riverbank that has been painstakingly carved into a semicircular harbor, the always bustling Port of Katheer is constantly crowded with every type of water-going vessel imaginable. The captain of any non-Qadiran vessel must invite a port inspector aboard to present a cargo manifest, as well as a gift of salt, often accompanied by monetary contributions. The Great Market. Nestled against the northern edge of the port is Katheer's Great Market, where ancient buildings and makeshift stalls stand side by side. Rapid-fire haggling that would be considered insulting in the more sedate old souk rings through the spice-laden air, but the greatest commodity sold here is secrets. The Venikan College of Medicaments and Chirurgy. This sprawling complex stands at the center of the university district and boasts faculty trained in the latest medical sciences coming out of central Kelesh. The college was attacked 3 times over the course of the war with Taldor, but the common citizens of Katheer always came to its defense each time. The House of the Morning Star. Named in honor of Empress Ashtirat II, the House of the Morning Star is home to an order of well-trained monks that keep peace in Katheer's streets. The Azur Canal. This wide, shallow canal is flanked by marble and gold promenades. The clarity of its 3-foot deep waters is magically maintained, allowing viewers to enjoy the mosaics that line the canal's walls. While the canal's official purpose is to ferry goods from the Pashman to the palace, the cool and clean waters make it irresistible to Katheer's children and many adults. The promenades, shaded by fragrant cedars, palms, flowering trees, ornate marble arches, are a popular place for meals, lectures, and festivals. The Katheer Palace. The seat of imperial power in Qadira, the palace houses the satrap, the imperial vizier, and Katheer's imperial court. Commoners and foreigners are not allowed inside, unless accompanied by a noble patron. A smaller administrative building bordering the palace's public courtyard is open to everyone, and provides Keleshite citizens with liaisons to the Empire. The Lioness's Den. This glass palace is the home of Sophia, a Cheyenne of the Hexamenid branch of the imperial family and a distant cousin of Queen Shabat. Exiled to Katheer after a disagreement with the Emperor, she is attempting to sway Katheer's nobility into supporting the Emperor's son Kalan in the succession. The Old Souk. The oldest market in Katheer is also the most prestigious, though its status comes with considerable government oversight, and the resulting taxes drive up the prices. Nevertheless, for the first-time visitor to Katheer, the Old Souk provides a safe, clean venue where one can obtain a dazzling array of goods, foods, and services. The Temple of Dawn's Grace. Katheer's largest cathedral is the center of Saranite worship in Qadira, though its blunt rejection of the militant cult of the Dawnflower has brought it under fire from the cult's sympathizers and Katheer's government. Nevertheless, the graceful open-air building still welcomes thousands of loyal worshippers each morning as the faithful assemble to greet the sun. The Planar Institute. The imperial court maintains trade relations with multiple extraplanar powers, and it sponsored this grand school to better train merchants in the intricacies of extraplanar etiquette and business. The Sunset Crown. The western terminus of the Golden Road is a massive raised round plaza on the waterfront. Slender white pillars support a roof shaped like a giant replica of the imperial crown. While the Golden Road is in reality a network of routes rather than a single road, its name becomes stunningly literal in Katheer, where a wide gold-paved avenue blazes through the city to the crown. The plaza hosts a different assortment of merchants each day, though most of the goods sold here are too expensive for the average person to even dream of buying. Patrols guard the Golden Path itself incessantly, yet in the end their presence isn't necessary, as the ancient genie-fueled magic that helped pave the path protects it as well. The Zenith of the Dawnflower. A simple, windowless spire of white marble, the Zenith rises nearly 200 feet, its interior a great spiraling stairway from ground level to top landing. Sarenrae is said to favor those who visit the Zenith and make the great climb in supplication. The Port of Delena. Though the capital city of Katheer boasts a population of over 150,000 residents, the northern port of Delena nearly rivals it in terms of population. Almost 100,000 Qadirans live on the large port city on the southern banks of the Jalroon. The Jalroon River divides Qadira from Taldor, and has always been a hot zone in the conflict. Delena has therefore always stood on a military footing, especially in terms of its significant naval base. Skirmishes between the navy of the Taldan city of Gulsafar, located fewer than 25 miles northwest of Delena, have been very frequent, and have in fact increased in frequency in the last 20 years, despite other parts of the border conflict having largely cooled. Delena is not your typical military town, however, as its close proximity to Absalom, and the great influence the Qadiran merchant princes have started to apply there, means that Delena is a city that's also grown fat from the western trade. Nowhere is the dichotomy of Qadira and the Keleshite Empire's dualistic nature more starkly on display than in this mighty port city. The Saray Coast. The lush coastlands and high bluffs of the Saray Coast feature numerous hidden port towns popular with pirates. Taldan privateers also ply this stretch of water, eager to catch any Qadiran merchant vessels unaware and unescorted. Another danger of the Saray Coast is the prominent number of were-jackals, the same dangerous lycanthropic creatures common to Katapesh, as discussed in more detail in that video. On the southern end of the coast lies the Tower of Winds. Rising like a glistening spike of pearl white, the strange tower bears the symbols of the ancient deity Atar-Shamayan, discussed earlier in my religion section. If one climbs the stairs and listens carefully to the wind, she begins to hear voices on the air. These snatches of conversation sometimes come from the climber's past, overheard as if they were happening at that moment, though just as often they are between people unknown to her. Sometimes, however, they reference events that have not yet happened, as if the winds were bearing them back from the future. The ports of Demira and Avilan. Although the Pashman River Valley is considered its own separate geographic territory, the Pashman Delta, which encompasses the portion of the river from Katheer to the Inner Sea, is considered to be a part of the northern Paresh territory. Two significant port cities can be found in the delta, the more outlying city of Demira with just over 100,000 residents, and the more inward-lying city of Avilan with a population of just under 100,000. Although Demira is the larger port, they are both significant cities of similar size and scale to Delena in the north. Because of their close proximity to Katheer, they are often overshadowed by the capital, or are sometimes thought of as extensions of Katheer, in the same way that many great cities of the Sphinx River are thought of as lesser extensions of Sothis in Osirian. The Border Wood. The Jalrune River bisects the Border Wood, which can be found on both the Taldan and Qadiran sides of the border. Both Qadirans and Taldans use the woods on their respective sides of the border to dispatch reconnaissance teams and harry the opposing side's troops, and the woodlands are marred with the scars of skirmishes and forgotten traps. Because this is a contested hot zone, various criminal elements have learned to make use of the Border Wood as well. One such famous figure is Lundo, the Border Queen, who runs a large smuggling operation in the Border Wood. She is a scale-heart beastkin, a descendant of were-crocodiles, and has several natural-born were-crocodiles in her company as well. Alvarish. Located a mere 20 miles northeast of the capital, Alvarish does not connect to the capital directly by river like Demira and Avalan. Rather, it is situated on a high outcropping in the central plains of Paresh, on a high plateau covered in the tall grasses common to the region. Here a natural spring made it an optimal place for an oasis town, when the land was ruled by nomadic herders. The natural spring also serves as the headwaters of the Jackal, the western branch of the Ladan River, which also reaches Butraf and Karif in the White Mountains, and then flows north, past Namat to join the Jalrune River. Because the Jalrune is a perilous river for merchants, goods from the White Mountains are often shipped to Alvarish rather than Delena, and then laboriously conveyed to caravans for the overland journey to Katheer. This trade has made the oasis city of Alvarish fat with wealth. With a population of almost 120,000 residents, Alvarish has become the second largest city in Qadira after the capital. The White Mountains. The hardy people of the White Mountains, which the Taldans often call the Southern Range and which the Qadirans sometimes call the Northern Zho Mountains, are among the Satrapy's least affluent. Its rugged hills and cliffs stare across the border at Taldor, wondering when war will erupt. The residents of the White Mountains do not share the rest of the nation's hunger for war, though a larger-than-average percentage of its population is career military, since they have fewer options than their counterparts in the West. Points of interest in the White Mountains include Namat. Namat is a nomad city, a vast collection of luxurious tents sitting on the banks of the river Ladan. Although relatively small, often with fewer than 5,000 residents, but sometimes swelling to as many as 7,000 depending on which tribes are gathered there at the time, Namat is nonetheless culturally important to the pre-Keleshite nomads of the White Mountains and the Paresh Plains territories. These nomads ride from the mountains to the Saray coast, herding animals, and meeting in Namat to engage in trade and exchange in marriage alliances with other tribes. Butraf. Butraf is the largest city in the White Mountains territory. It is about half the size of the great cities of the Paresh Plains, with a population of about 50,000, but this makes it the most important cultural and commercial center in the White Mountains. It is located a few miles south of the banks of the Jackal River, the river that forms the western border with the neighboring region of the plains of Paresh. Butraf's two great trade partners are Karif in the mountains proper, and of course the great city of Alvarish, located at the headwaters of the Jackal. Butraf is also home to a great many Parahin dwarves. These industrious dwarves typically live as business people and smiths among the Qadirans and worship Sarenrae in an aspect tied to the fires of the forges they tend. The Monument of Urfa Halij. Urfa Halij is an ancient memorial located south of the Jalrune River, though it sits on the Qadiran side of the border. It used to be part of the prefecture of Sofra before the border moved. It is sacred to both the people of Taldor and Qadira. Urfa Halij marks the location of the first ever battle between the peoples of Taldor and the Empire of Kelesh, known as the Battle of Urfa to the Taldans and the Battle of Halij to the Qadirans. Both sides recognize this place as sacred, and by custom no sort of conflict takes place for miles around the monument. This has made it one of the most peaceful and fertile areas among the war-ravaged border between Taldor and Qadira. The Urfa Halij monument itself consists of two raised arms, one wielding a Taldan-style longsword, the other a Qadiran scimitar, the blades of both meeting in the middle where a huge diamond is set. The diamond catches even the dimmest of light, making it seem as if the blades are sparkling, even on a moonlit night. The garrison of Omash. On a leveled mountaintop on the border between Taldor and Qadira sits Omash, a sprawling fortress that serves as the easternmost stop for patrols riding from the coast to the mountains. It is also the primary training ground for Qadira's Satrapian Guard. At any given time it houses close to 30,000 soldiers and support staff. 12 schools of war, each specializing in a particular tactic or troop type, shares the facility. Soldiers train as light horse, heavy horse, camel, and elephant cavalry on broad riding grounds, and can acquire competency in bows, pikes, scimitars, and spears. They also practice siege warfare and storming castles. A few elite warriors even train as riders of flying creatures, while others have been working diligently at training the ill-tempered Orem-Varaxes that dwell in the region as allied fighting beasts. High Commander Zarathus al-Samia Ursani Hakal commands Omash and badgers the satrap for permission to make feinting raids across the border in hopes of provoking a Taldan attack that will lead to war. Zerbistes II has denied his requests, but both are not so secretly impatient for battle. The soldiers here get plenty of real practice regardless, against real foes, even though there is no open conflict with Taldor at the moment. Ogre raiding parties from the White Mountains prove a constant thorn in the side of the hillfolk. Commander Zarathus does periodically send emissaries to the ogres in the hopes he can pay them off and direct their aggression towards their northern rivals, but only about half the emissaries return, and those that do rarely are able to get anything productive from them. Another local challenge to have emerged recently are the forces of a hostile fae known as a Rebisu that has begun to prey on the camp. While for decades the camp avoided conflict with the desert fae that inhabit the foothills, the Rebisu's fondness for taking on the forms of various soldiers and officers and sowing discord among their units has caused the commander to consider changing his position on how to interact with the desert fae. The Sun Hill Monastery. One of the wonders of the White Mountains is the magnificent Sun Hill Monastery. The large temple complex is arranged between two major chapels, one consecrated to Regathiel and one to Sarenrae. This monastery is also the headquarters of the Eleli, or the Pure Ones. Formed in response to the abuses by the cult of the Dawnflower, the Pure Ones are an order of inquisitors of Sarenrae, who are called upon to determine whether an individual has committed a sin that warranted expulsion from the church. Eleli inquisitors attempt to avoid any connections with those outside their order who might compromise their judgment and follow a strict code of devotion. Their ideals require celibacy, refusal of monetary gifts, and general avoidance of unnecessary physical contact. Most go veiled, desiring that others see them only as representatives of their order rather than as individuals, and many habitually speak in the plural. Many pure ones are Nephilim, or planar scions, who have the blood of flame-touched outsiders in their veins, most commonly the Peri, a race of burning celestials native to the Everlight, Sarenrae's domain in the plane of Nirvana. In fact, the leader of the monastery is a Peri herself, named Nuria, and she is responsible for all the actions of the Pure Ones across Qadira. Karif. Nestled in the foothills between two spurs of the White Mountains, along the narrow gorge of the Ladan River, lies the town of Karif. Karif is predominantly a mining town, drawing from the veins of copper, tin, and iron that can be found in the mountains, and shipping them down the river for smelting into steel at the Parahine forges of Butraf. The steel is forged into weapons and armor, where it is then shipped to the garrison of Omash to serve the military, or further to the great oasis city of Alvarish, from there to the rest of the Satrapy and the greater empire. For its relatively small and humble size, Karif is reasonably prosperous, and for this reason the town needs to be well guarded and fortified against the region's native ogre tribes. The White Pass and Kadlas Mavari. The northern Taldan range of the White Mountains and the southern Qadiran range are separated by the White Pass. In the mountains north of the White Pass there can be found the headwaters of the Jalrun River, and beyond that the Taldan prefecture of White March. The pass itself therefore lies technically in Qadiran territory, but the pass is poorly trafficked because it lies quite close to the dangerous Taldan border. Poorly trafficked, but still in use, however, predominantly by the brave nomads of the windswept wastes. Just east of the pass, on the border territories, lies the nomad settlement of Kadlas Mavari. One of the easternmost settlements of Qadira, Kadlas Mavari is an oasis town built around a shrine to Lugali Samaru, the Palm Tree King. Here travelers buy supplies, charms to offer the Palm Tree King at oasis stops, and, if they can afford them, magical items that create water or protect against the heat and thirst. Gazbilla and Salav. Both slightly larger than Karif, with populations ranging from 12 to 15,000 people, are the foothill settlements of Gazbilla and Salav, located on the eastern foothills of the White Mountains, facing the inland deserts of Kazmarin, and beyond that, the greater empire of Kelesh. Despite being technically closer to the rest of the empire, their position, located between the hard mountains and the desert, have proven difficult to access for trade. Although they once served as vital staging grounds for the conquest of the satrapy of Qadira, these cities both typify the White Mountains region, breeding a proud and hardy people, but who lack significantly in wealth and material comforts. The ruins of Kur. The abandoned city of Kur are the last indications of the Parahine dwarves' one-time mountain settlements. The empty streets of the ancient forge city of Kur are scattered with broken bronze ingots and travelled only by whistling winds. The city was abandoned long ago, and rumours abound of a powerful and mysterious guardian Naga who roams the ruins, keeping intruders out and perhaps keeping some greater terror confined within. The Pashman River Valley. The Pashman River Valley tracks the area around the Pashman River from the start of the Delta region all the way east to the remote city of Koka on the other side of the mountains. It extends about 50 miles from each side of the river, and as the river cuts its way through the southern range, the terrain here is rugged, but also relatively fertile. It is known for its snow-capped peaks, crystalline rivers, and flourishing wildlife. The breathtaking vistas from its mountainside cities are said to inspire great creativity, and many of Qadira's most gifted artisans and artists seek homes in this region. The great cities of the Pashman River: Ishad, Shilay, Kerim, Lapul, and Shamara. The varied and powerful major cities of the Pashman River are all significant settlements, ranging in population from the largest city of Ishad at 80,000 people to the smallest city of Shamara at 50,000 people. The citizenry here combine a great range of professions and backgrounds, but especially various kinds of artisans, including architects, smiths, and engineers, and various kinds of artists, including poets, musicians, and writers. The territory also has citizens of a more esoteric profession, such as astrologers, fortune-tellers, and philosophers, and obviously a healthy number of farmers and hunters as well. Among them, Lapul stands out in this regard, as it sits on the southern bank of the southernmost point in the river, well into the hot sands of the Ketz Desert. As such, a great many desert rangers make this their base of operations. With a markedly more southern architecture, most of the city's buildings are low mud brick houses, and tents from the caravans that pass through the city outnumber the permanent structures by a ratio of almost 2 to 1. Sheikh Shamraf al-Hadari rules the city, an ardent imperial loyalist married to Amir Jabia al-Jawan. The rest of the great cities along the river have more similar architecture, each resembling an increasingly smaller version of the capital, characterized by sweeping structures and towering minarets. The Pashman River is the most well-traveled waterway along the Golden Road, and these cities represent natural stopping points on the road to the greater empire of Kelesh. The Kamawigar Shrine. This abandoned shrine in the southern range features a massive statue of the god Irori carved above a natural cave that used to serve as a home to various monks and priests that tended to it. Unfortunately, it fell to the region's many monsters, and it is now occupied by packs of harpies and their allies. The ruins of al-Bashir. Once a thriving city, al-Bashir has also fallen into ruin. The treasure rumored to be strewn throughout these ruins, left behind by entranced victims of the harpies who roost in the mountains, is said to be significant, yet there may be more than harpies to contend with in the ruins of al-Bashir, as to date none have managed to enter the city and escape it with enough loot to make the expedition worthwhile. Koka. Koka is the easternmost stop in Qadira for travelers heading further into Kelesh. It does a brisk business in travel, supplies, camels, and horses, yet the settlement has staunchly resisted the temptation to grow in size. Permits for settling in Koka are rarely granted. Still, for those with sufficient coin, Koka offers an unusually wide selection of magic items and fine weapons for a town of its size. Wealthy merchant Usman al-Dagara sells potion and alchemical supplies from his shop, the Queen's Cup, while Anisha al-Lanat Bahiri Basmat, a scion of the famed Basmat merchant house, maintains a massive emporium of masterwork and magical items named the Basmat Armory. Koka is a fine place to find deals on other goods too, since many caravans passing through seek to unload merchandise they don't want to take back to Kelesh or see taxed in Qadira. Koka is also an excellent spot for those looking for work to land jobs as caravan guards, and for those wishing to travel on the Golden Road in relative safety to join up with other well-protected caravans. There is also an Imperial Forces base adjacent to Koka, led by Captain Jathbia Alistias. As these forces ensure the border taxes are collected correctly, a few of Koka's enterprising merchants, like the notorious Mezij al-Ilyara, also specialize in tools for smugglers, false-bottom chests, belts and shoes that conceal coins, magical means of disguising objects, and so on. There is a final danger in Koka, rarely discussed by the many merchants that cross this way station. In the Darkland, situated thousands of feet under the city, roils a living pit of magma called the Magravor, in the center of which sits a portal to the Malabulge, the 6th layer of Hell. A pit fiend named Mardazuk and a servant of Moloch guards this portal and oversees a small army of grey dwarves that bring him slave sacrifices from the surface to be impaled on the horns of Moloch's altar below. The Ketz Desert. Though areas of the northwestern Ketz Desert feature the rolling golden sands and domed white oasis cities that make up the Qadiran landscapes imagined by foreign visitors, most of the area is in fact semi-arid desert, with dry grasses, cacti, and sagebrush. In the east, as the elevation rises, the desert gives way to plains, and eventually to the lush Tapur Forest. The Ketz Desert region, from a municipal governance standpoint, also includes the island of Yanamir, off the coast of Qadira. This large island features the bustling harbor of Maharev, the cultural capital of the Ketz Desert territory. Between the cities of El-Shalad in Osirian, which is still predominantly populated by Keleshite migrants even to this day, and the city of Kundarai to the south, the Keleshites control much of the sea trade between the Obari Ocean and the Inner Sea. Despite their well-entrenched control of this territory, this doesn't stop Katapeshi pirates from Okeno in the south from braving the waters north to this busy strait, knowing full well that merchants here are often better laden and more poorly defended against pirates, relying on the powerful navies of the three sister cities to protect them. Maharev. Rocky Yanamir Island is host to the city of Maharev, one of Qadira's strongest naval ports and by extension one of its strongest military bases. 75,000 Keleshites call the great port of Maharev their home. The fortress city of Maharev has never fallen to an enemy, and the deep caves that riddle the isle are said to be stocked with supplies that could last for decades if the city were to succumb to siege. Further rumors also suggest that subterranean passages connect to escape routes via the Darklands that allow for foot travel between Avestan and Garand far beneath the waters that separate them. Hawa. Smaller than Maharev, but still of great cultural significance in the desert, is the mainland port of Hawa, located along the Ketz Desert coast 70 miles west of the Paresh city of Demira. With a population of 40,000, Hawa is smaller than the cities that surround the capital in the more fertile territories, and like Lopul at the other end of the river, its architecture and design shows it as a city that is halfway between one of the Pashman River metropolises and a desert oasis town. Indeed, desert tribes prefer to stop in Hawa over the other great cities if they wish to acquire goods from Katheer, as it's a city more suited to their tastes, with vast fields of tents beyond the city proper catering to the nomads. Temple of the Eternal Obelisk. An ancient temple lies buried in the central sands of the Ketz Desert. Rumors suggest that some life-extending power lies in the temple, perhaps a grove of mysterious sun orchids, or perhaps something else entirely. Regardless, adventurers have had a difficult time exploring it, as the temple has been claimed by a large tribe of Maftets that nest in the ruins of the old temple complex. Ehur. Ehur and Hanpa are classic examples of Qadiran oasis towns. Established because a small lake fed by an underground spring has created a relatively lush area in the middle of the surrounding deserts, these oasis towns are crucial stopover locations for desert nomad tribes. Ehur in particular lies in the center of the Ketz, and it is renowned as a city of genies and geniekin, where Qadira's trading partners on the elemental plains maintain embassies. Because occasionally geniekin elsewhere in Qadira face prejudice and mistreatment against their kind, they often find themselves more comfortable here in Ehur, where greater numbers of their people can be found. Hanpa. A little further south from Ehur is the remote oasis town of Hanpa. Hanpa is most famous for a large shrine to Pazuzu and the windstorms it summons. Its citizens largely keep to themselves. They make no secret of their worship of the demon lord, but they purport to venerate him out of a need for protection against the harsh desert winds rather than out of adoration. The town's location away from most trade routes helps keep the people of Hanpa isolated, and the potent windstorms that protect it have to date held off any real attempt to eradicate the demonic cultists. Teke, Kundarai, and Merashai. Three major ports line the southwestern coastline of the Ketz Desert territory. Teke and Merashai are quite small by comparison to Kundarai, with populations of 22,000 and 5,000 respectively, while Kundarai dominates the southwest Ketz coast with a population of almost 35,000 residents. Kundarai's claim to fame has always been its weaving industry. The luxuriously plush carpets of Kundarai with their hypnotic patterns are prized across Galarian. Most are of course merely decorative floor coverings, but if one pays enough to the right seller, one might be able to acquire a rare flying carpet here as well. The Tapur Forest. The Tapur region begins with the Tapur Forest, but also encompasses the eastern, less populated half of the Ketz Desert. These lands are lightly settled at this point and serve mostly as the homes for nomadic peoples. The Tapur Forest itself is divided into two distinct sections. The northern Tapur is drier, dominated by cedar, pine, oak, and olive trees, and it is more heavily settled by humanity. The southern Tapur is dense, lush, and far wilder, with silk, pear, pomegranate, and lime trees. Bears, leopards, monkeys, tigers, and wolves roam the area. Colorful parrots and other birds of paradise flit between the branches of the trees, and the marshy areas are home to ibises, herons, and swans. Both areas support numerous towns and villages, though the denser forest and the more dangerous creatures in the southern Tapur tend to limit these settlements to its fringes. The people of the Tapur region are considered provincial by much of Qadira's population, since they tend to stay out of Qadiran politics and are less interested in foreign goods and luxuries. Of note to the region is the encroachment of the Ketz Desert into the woodland, which is slowly expanding and consuming the forest land. The rate of expansion is infinitesimal, yet over the centuries it has increasingly come to be a concern to many of the region. A small grove of druids is seeking to reverse this slow deterioration of the forest. The most important city in the region is actually Lopul, located along the Pashman River, although administratively it falls in the Pashman River Valley territory. The desert nomads come here first when seeking manufactured goods from the Qadiran cities. The Stronghold of Tafinya. The Stronghold of Tafinya appears on no official maps, and few are aware of its existence. Tucked away deep in the Tapur Forest, it is protected by a tangle of illusions, mystical wards, and occult magic designed to confuse any who approach and send the person walking in the opposite direction. The only way to approach it is to bear a special opal talisman keyed to the wards, which allows its bearer to pass through the stronghold's defenses. All that stands at the forest's heart is a single aged cedar tree in the midst of an eerily still clearing. The cedar stands as a silent sentinel, and only those who present their Tafinya stones and speak the correct passphrase can pass through the ancient tree into a stairwell descending deep underground to an iron door standing in a humble sandstone cave. Beyond lies an entire hidden village that serves as the western center of operations for the Hatharat, Kelesh's intelligence agency and diplomatic corps. Hatharat agents are not always ethnic Keleshites. Non-Keleshite agents are often among the most valuable to the Hatharat in Qadira, for they are not only capable of interacting with other cultures in the Inner Sea region without tipping the hand of the Hatharat's interest, but also, and perhaps more importantly, bring to the Hatharat perspectives and opinions that traditional Keleshite ways of thought may not have considered. Tafinya itself may be small, but it is not primitive. Magical mirrors allow communication with the Hatharat's headquarters in Isfahel, and their entire complex is devoted to magical and non-magical methods of altering agents' appearances. Commander Marik Tezadi oversees Tafinya's operations and can usually be found in his office, absorbing intelligence reports with nearly superhuman speed. Hatavit. With a population of over 300 residents, Hatavit is one of the larger lumber camps and woodland settlements around the southern Tapur. However, it was recently hit by a massive sandstorm. Most of the carvers, lumberjacks, soldiers, and woodworkers fled, and Katheer has had no contact with the camp since. Rumors persist that the sandstorm was no natural event, and that the vengeful sorcerer who created it did so for some as yet undetermined purpose. Gurat. At the eastern end of the Ketz Desert, high up in the southern range, is the walled city of Gurat. This curious city, home to about 8,000, is a popular haven for mystics, philosophers, and astrologers, and a number of arcane schools have sprung up here in the past few decades as well. Gurati carpet weavers are also famed for their skill, and many Qadirans believe the patterns of their rugs hold secret prophecies. The source of Gurat's mystical reputation is that it is also the home to the supposedly deathless Cyclops seer known as the Mouthpiece, a 300-year-old creature who speaks in riddles and is said to have descended directly from the High Lords of the Golgan, that once held much of the lands of Garand and Iblidos in antiquity. The satrap himself greatly values Mouthpiece's wisdom, and in fact has declared it a capital offense for anyone but him to speak with the aging seer. He has set 1,000 deafened eunuchs to guard the site, yet rumors suggest that anyone who can pass these defenses will be welcomed by the Cyclops, who believes any who can seek him out are worthy of his wisdom. The Zho Mountains. The Zho Mountains in Qadira run south from the Pashman River before curving westwards and extending to the coast. The rugged landscape makes travel and shipping in the area difficult, keeping settlement sizes small. It also makes the region an excellent hideout for smugglers and others who live outside the law. As one of the least traveled of Qadira's regions, the Zho peaks are home to some of its most dangerous creatures, including dragons, drakes, sphinxes, thunderbirds, wyverns, and numerous types of giants, as well as various orc tribes, some of which the satrap has been known to hire as mercenaries. Zobel and Zonar. The volcanoes Zobel and Zonar are often called the Angry Brothers, after a Qadiran myth that they were once two titans turned into volcanoes after their enmity nearly destroyed the world. Zobel, although the smaller of the two volcanoes, erupts more often. Zonar, the larger one, is more dangerous when it erupts, but it is less volatile. Crystal Crag. Another predominantly Geniekin settlement, Crystal Crag boasts a particularly large population of Ifrit and Oread Geniekin. The town, located high in the Zho Peaks, is ruled over by the Ifriti sorceress Tegora Cinderfury. Although some humans can be found in Crystal Crag, the vast majority of its population boasts some earth or fire elemental ancestry. The ruins of Shadun, Leith Springs, and Bloodrise Rock. These three locations on the eastern and southern Zho range feature prominently in the first edition standalone Pathfinder module, The Fear of Dust. The first encountered of these locations is Bloodrise Rock, a hidden stronghold in the foothills of the Zho Mountains located some 50 miles north of the city of Al-Hiraf. Bloodrise Rock is a terrible shrine to Lamashtu. It is built into a rocky outcropping that has been carved into the belly, bosom, and torso of an enormous pregnant figure. The site is ancient, and the altar and braziers of this shrine show untold years of erosion and dark stains. Human cultists of Lamashtu dwell here, along with various communities of Lamashtu-worshipping gnolls and their allies. Further up are the Leith Springs. The region's various tribes, and even many of its common monsters, avoid these notorious hot springs. Stinking, sulphurous waters, heated to boiling by geothermal activity, percolate here in bubbling mud pits and wide steaming pools of poison. Few visitors ever return, and those who do are profoundly changed, often unable to recognize friends and loved ones. This, coupled with the strange and horrible noises that sometimes pierce the endless banks of fog, have given rise to the rumor that the Leith Springs are terribly haunted. Finally, the ruins of Shadun show what might have been a significant city once, destroyed by volcanic activity. Most of Shadun consists of ash-covered valleys, stony bluffs, cooled lava flows, and the occasional ruined tower or collapsed monument breaking through the surface. Many of these half-buried ruins have served as monster lairs or been looted by human and gnoll scavengers over the centuries, while many other buildings remain buried beneath 100 feet of volcanic ash. At the heart of Shadun lies Oblivion Citadel, a mighty fortress built a long time ago to protect some ancient artifacts. Within its great domed halls, thousands of eyes etched into the walls and domed ceilings of this chamber stare down towards a massive golden door. 3 keyholes mar its otherwise smooth surface, while a dozen brass keys, each shaped in a different symbol, litter the floor. The further details of what can be found at these locations are explored in that adventure. The Maharev Jungle. Bounded to the west by the southern range and the Zho Mountains, and to the east by the Meraz River, the region of Maharev contains lush jungles and fertile farmlands sheltered by the rain shadow of the mountains. The region's rich soil ensures it provides much of the produce that feeds the rest of the nation of Qadira. Nestled between the high mountains and the largely impassable desert to the south, Maharev is the region most sheltered from any foreign aggression. Combined with bountiful harvests, the relative safety of the so-called Jewel of the Meraz has created a generous yet complacent populace that feels more connected with its parent civilization of Kelesh than with most of the rest of Qadira. Beyond the wealthy river valley, the depths of the Maharev jungle itself are largely unexplored. The strong presence of Klipoths, who have somehow entered the jungle through ancient long-closed portals to the abyss, help to limit serious exploration of the jungle, as does a particularly aggressive tribe of wood giants. These giants have learned to train the local jungle drakes and worship the Green Mother, viewing the jungle's numerous carnivorous plants as direct manifestations of her will from the First World. Along the fertile river valley, the Jewel of the Meraz comprises 5 major cities: Al-Hiraf, Kaharid, Isa, Nirfan, and San Meshul. The largest of these is Kaharid. Boasting a population of over 50,000, Kaharid numbers among the great cities of Qadira and is the cultural center of the Maharev region. Also known as the Turquoise City, it sits at the meeting of the Maharev and Meraz rivers, amid rich copper and turquoise mines. In addition to the jewelry it produces, it is known for its fine pottery, which often incorporates crushed jewels into its glazes. It is also the center of worship of the White Feather monks, and has recently become a pilgrimage site for the cultists of Rodira, the Dark Sister of Knowledge. San Meshul is the second largest of the Meraz cities, at a population of about 30,000, followed by Al-Hiraf and Nirfan, with 20,000 and 10,000 residents respectively. A few smaller settlements can be found as well. The village of Isa, for example, is only about 5,000 residents, and caters to small groups of explorers seeking to map the southern wilds of the Maharev jungle. Finally, up the river, beyond the territories marked on this map, lies Rakist, near the headwaters of the Meraz River. It is not a Qadiran town in any sense, but a centre of worship for Rovagug. Despite the satrap's best efforts to destroy the town and scatter the populace, it stubbornly hangs on, supported by orc tribes from the mountains. The stark, ragged town appeals to criminals, outcasts, and murderers of both the human and non-human variety. A fair number of gnolls and bugbears reside within Rakist's walls as well. Although the cave giants of the nearby mountains don't dwell in Rakist, the town maintains an agreement with them of mutual defense, one backed by the personal guarantee of Rakist's sadistic ruler, warlord Magyarsh, a half-orc Nephilim with Clipoth blood in her veins. The Alavah Peninsula. A large landmass extending southward from the Zho Mountains, the Alavah Peninsula is a coastal desert with fine-grained salt-laced soil. The southern tip of the peninsula, known as the Emerald Coast, is more fertile, and its farmlands support a dense collection of medium-sized cities. The proximity of the danger-haunted Minatory Isles to the south keep those who dwell upon this lush coastline on constant watch for threats from across the narrow sound. The center of the peninsula is drier, covered with translucent shimmering sands and iridescent crystals that rear up out of the dunes. Beautiful though they may be, the strange sands that refract the harsh sun into rainbows and mirages also intensify the heat, making much of the area uninhabitable for most humans. Ushumgal. An ornate city with soaring towers, broad streets, and stone filigree buildings, Ushumgal has few visible guards for settlement of such obvious wealth. Yet few would dare attempt to enter without an invitation, for the city is ruled by a cabal of powerful and mysterious women known as the Sisters of Bronze. Rumors persist that these women are in fact bronze dragons who maintain human form to run the city. But true or not, their influence over the many banks and many of Qadira's internal initiatives cannot be denied. The Citadel of Flame. History books claim that the Citadel of Flame, a headquarters of the cult of Moloch, was completely buried by a sandstorm. Yet the mysterious cleric Hafshi al-Moloch regularly recruits followers in Sedek to return with her to her desert retreat, which rumor holds to be this lost citadel. The Tents of Eruk. This encampment of impossibly beautiful men and women boasts a massive central tent, owned by Eruk, an exiled Jathum air genie who never speaks of the reasons for his banishment to the material plane. He accepts no gifts from those who enter his home, requesting the fulfillment of a task instead. Only the bravest accept, in the hopes of being invited deeper into his tents. Ayesh, Sukri, and Sadia. The three great western-facing coastal ports of the Alavah Peninsula are Ayesh, Sukri, and Sadia. At a population of 70,000 residents, Sukri is the largest of these, dealing in such diverse mineral and agricultural goods as brass, bronze, copper, grain, livestock, salt, spices, tin, and zinc. The port cities also provide other nearby settlements with high-quality finished goods, especially weapons, furnishings, and of course shipbuilding. Yalakin. North of Sedek is a mysterious settlement known as the Wailing City. Few travelers venture there, and it is rarely spoken of willingly by the people of Qadira. The city is dedicated to the goddess Yaya, the Cry in the Wastes, and serves as a sacred place for those without heirs in their twilight years. Visitors welcomed by silent priestesses are led to the temple's shaded courtyard for a simple repast. At night, supplicants are taken to a broken tower where they offer prayers. If accepted, desert owls join in mournful cries. The supplicant can choose to return to the temple or sacrifice their life's blood on an ancient altar, with the latter resulting in the fulfillment of their prayer. The High Cleric Zahida Alfei oversees the temple, and he turns away any visitors not seeking Yaya's aid. The temple is not completely controlled by the cult, and is considered contested ground, as a clan of cryosphinxes claim it as a burial site, and troublemaking Fae have claimed part of the city as well. Despite clashes between the city's clergy and these Fae, neither faction has gained dominance in the battle for control of Yalakin. Sedek. Located on the other side of the peninsula in a wide, placid bay, with a population of over 100,000, Sedek is a great and mighty city, a resort for visiting Keleshite nobles. Described in more detail in my Firebrand's faction guide, Sedek was once the heart of Qadira's slave trade, with slaves being brought here to tend to the opulent gardens and elegant plazas, not to mention the staggeringly wealthy amirs who would vacation here. However, Firebrand activity, as described in that video, has brought an end to the slave trade, even in Sedek, and so the city has had no choice but to reinvent itself somewhat in recent years. It has other things to offer, of course. The Kali spice markets, for example, offer the widest selections and best prices on goods that often cannot be obtained anywhere else outside of Kazmarin. Jawafik. Quite a bit smaller than Sedek, Jawafik, with a population of 30,000, is another important port city on the inland bay. Jawafik are most renowned for the quality of their mercenaries, and corsairs from the city in particular can be found serving protection on ships all over the Obari. Both Jawafik and Sadek are separated from the three western ports by the Burnt Lands, a blasted, div-haunted wasteland whose dangerous denizens plague the coastal settlements. Of all the coastal cities, warriors from Jawafik most frequently mount expeditions into the Burnt Lands and try to stamp out the Div menace. Divs are described in more detail in my Azura Divs and Clipoths video. The Minotauri Isles. Sailors are dissuaded from visiting the islands south of Qadira by tales of strange lights, eerie songs, and monstrous creatures. Comprising 3 major islands and numerous smaller islets, each is fraught with dangers, whether from deadly creatures on the islets or monsters infesting the surrounding waters. Alogakil, the largest, is a jungle-covered expanse with a mysterious black mountain rising like a claw. Strange purple lights on the mountain, and a sprawling violet porphyry temple dedicated to the Queen of the Night Mahathala contribute to the island's mysterious aura. Devil worshippers, including changelings and tieflings, are rumored to make pilgrimages to the hidden temple near the Black Peak. Dagon's Fang, the second largest island, has a dark reputation and is the least visited. Conflicting rumors abound, from marsh giants to debased fae and undead shipwreck survivors. Infamous accounts suggest a visit by the demon lord Dagon spawned malformed sea monsters in its weed-choked lagoons. The smallest of the major islands, Spider Island, lives up to its name, adorned with immense silken webs. It is inhabited by a great many monstrous spiders, including pale ettercaps along the shores. Deeper inland, manipulative leng spiders rule and use the island as a base for their nefarious plans in the waking world. The Meraz Desert. The vast Meraz Desert in southern Qadira hides a glorious lost history and forgotten evils. The endless desert was once a magnificent fertile savanna teeming with life. Then the 4 heralds of dust withered its fields down to endless sand dunes and its trees to bone-white skeletons. Now it separates Qadira from the rest of Kelesh. The Meraz is covered in rolling dunes of gold and white sand, and home to ancient structures protected by haunted divs. Of all the parts of the desert, the sub-region of Al-Zabrit is perhaps the most famous, known for its especially secretive tribes who also breed Galarian's finest horses. The Meraz itself is extremely arid, and temperatures during the day reach deadly levels of heat. Wayo's Rest. Nestled in the gulf between Sadek and the Meraz Desert is a small chunk of rock covered in verdant life and elaborate structures. On this garden island, Lady Wayo, a powerful siren, presides over a harem of handsome young Qadiran men supplied by Sadek on the other side of the bay, who are each required to spend 4 years in indentured luxury. This tribute buys Qadiran ships free passage around her island, and she actively comes to the aid of troubled Qadiran vessels in her waters. Demayan. A relatively young settlement in Qadira, Demayan emerged when the Whitewater clan discovered a spring in the Meraz Desert. Initially, they prospered by selling water at a fair price and investing in expansive irrigation projects connecting the oasis to the Meraz River. However, as generations passed and the wealth grew, the family's focus on community declined. A collapse of the irrigation canal a decade ago prompted the matriarch, Tianka Whitewater, to raise water prices, leading to a decline in Demayan's prosperity. Now the town is in decline, caught in a cycle of desperate farmers leaving for greener pastures due to unaffordable water. Empty buildings, encroaching desert, and predatory ankegs add to the town's woes. Demayan's remaining residents include stubborn farmers, a wealthy elite, scavengers, and transient populations relying on the spring's waters for travel. Tales of the town's lost glory are common, with many residents having plans to restore former comforts, primarily centered around repairing the irrigation channels. However, the Ankeg attacks and a perceived supernatural streak of bad luck have thwarted all engineering solutions to date. Demayan is an important location in the Feast of Dust standalone module and is described in more detail in that adventure. The Sun-Bleached Tower. Not far east from Demayan is the Sun-Bleached Tower, a horrifying edifice and a place sacred to the Lords of Abaddon, the 4 horsemen of the Apocalypse. This massive structure of interlocking human bones, bleached white in the unforgiving sun, rises like a skeletal claw from the desert sand. Buttresses and broad corners support its wide base, while the top, 300 feet above, vanishes into a dizzying haze. It is a strangely mesmerizing place, and at any given time hundreds, perhaps thousands of humanoid figures crowd around the tower, sunburned and gaunt, and staring transfixed at the structure before them. The tower itself reaches up to a point of planar instability, so demonic cults could make sacrifices directly to Abaddon. Ihalar. The westernmost example of the Katibi style, and the greatest concentration of Katibi people in Qadira, Ihalar is a massive complex that extends deep underground as well as above, supporting close to 20,000 people. These days its lowest levels have been abandoned, but light wells into the uppermost of the underground levels have allowed for unique underground gardens. Some residents of the underground portion of the city emerge only to trade with passing merchants or to graze their herds. Izet. The largest port in the Meraz Desert territory is Izet, located on the opposite side of the bay from Sadek. It has benefited greatly from the emancipation of slaves. When Sadek sought to convert their large number of unpaid slaves into low-wage indentured servants, many took advantage of their newfound liberty to travel to Izet across the way. Izet has since self-styled itself as an alternative, more modern palace city, still catering to wealthy travelers, but offering fairer wages to its support staff. While it still does not quite have the reputation of Sadek, it is growing quickly, and the so-called friendly rivalry between the two cities could grow ugly in the future if Izet continues to poach Sadek's best workers. Heger, the last stop of the inner sea region along the Obari Ocean before the cities of Kazmaran, is Heger. Once considered the cultural capital of the Meraz region, the sudden growth of the city of Izet means it is no longer the largest, but from a trade standpoint it remains a critical part of the Qadiran state all the same. Vudran merchants use it en route to their holdings in Jalmaray, and the Empire of Kelesh traffics goods to and from the inner sea via this thriving port city. The Jazona Oasis. Home to the Amalas Hekba tribe, a clan of desert giants granted imperial citizenship as thanks for their protection of caravans passing through the Kelesh Desert, this oasis town serves as the headquarters for their work. The oasis covers roughly 50 square miles around a trio of lakes known as the Three Wisdoms. Janar Malakra, a desert giant ranger, heads the giants' mercenary troops and is the most influential of their chieftains. Kumarin. Only the tribes of the Meraz Desert remember Kumarin, and they pass on its name only as a warning. Even they don't know the exact location of the ancient settlement, for the shifting sands capriciously reveal it and then reveal it. Kumarin was a pre-Earthfall metropolis, but it fell into ruin long before the plummeting of the Starstone. Nothing is known about the true nature of its original inhabitants, only that subsequent civilizations considered it so accursed that they labored to shift the Meraz River tens of miles away from the site, rather than build their cities anywhere near it. Those few who survive a visit to Kumarin are unable to talk about what they see there. They are sometimes unable to speak at all, but frequently babble about not having brought an appropriate gift. These survivors return blind, their faces burned with brands depicting wheels of wings, eyes, and fire. A few legends of the mysterious goddess Shahar holds that the ruins contain documents recording the true names of angels and devils, written in a primordial language that reshapes reality as it is spoken. Other legends claim that Kumarin was a city built by aliens who visited Galarian before humanity first rose, creatures such as the alien Elder Things or the enigmatic Anunnaki. The truth, however, is likely something else entirely. The Lost Palace of Satrap el-Akban. In the tale of Qadira's ascent to political prominence in the Inner Sea region, a notable chapter involves the Satrap el-Akban, who formed a perilous alliance with the genie noble Hassalganosh. The satrap, who held the genie's third wish for years, in a rare drunken moment of lucidity suddenly wished to be free from the burdens of great wealth. To Al-Ekban's dismay, Hassalganosh granted the wish by transporting all the riches from the satrap's vaults to an elaborate palace deep in the Meraz Desert. Furious at the loss, Al-Ekban attempted to recover his wealth, but the genie's clever traps and deadly guardians thwarted all efforts. Unable to reclaim his fortune, the satrap had powerful sorcerers trap Hassalganosh within the palace and conceal it with many illusions. The location of this treasure, sometimes known as the Drunken Genie Hoard, remains a tantalizing mystery to this day, with no one having confirmed its true location, though many make claims to have a rare map to this fabled palace.